Welcome to the Logistics Point interviews. I'm Nick Bugilov. Today I'm joined by Alan McCleave, who is the Regional Manager UK and Nordic for NewMotion, a company that is working on transforming and improving the EV infrastructure. Alan, thank you very much for joining me.
No, thank you for inviting me. So morning all.
And one of the first questions when it comes to EVs is, what are the challenges for people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. I think in the logistics world, I think the most important thing is power at site. It's probably something most people have never really had to worry about before, unless you're on an operational site. So if you're on an operational site and you're running lots of electrical processing type equipment, then electric's been on the radar for a period of time. But if you're carrying goods and stuff like that, then power may not have been quite as important thing. So in terms of, you're going to get new terms. It's an educational experience for everyone. So really dull terms like agreed supply capacity, i.e. the power that's coming into your site, is going to become very well known in the next few years, if it isn't already. So I suspect a lot of your viewers and readers will already probably be familiar with some of those things. As that and peak demand, or maximum demand as it's sometimes called, because effectively your agreed supply capacity less your peak or maximum demand equals your available capacity. So if we take an example, a typical business site might have 70 kVA as power supply coming into the building. If you've got a lot more than that, if you've got hundreds of kVA, then you're very lucky, or you've got a very big site. It depends, but a typical site might have 70 kVA, and then maximum demand could be something like, let's say 35 kVA to keep the numbers simple. So that means your available supply is 35 kVA. Convert that into kilowatts, it's about 30 kilowatts. It can vary, but roughly speaking. So suddenly you're having a discussion with a site that might have this 30 kilowatts available, but they want 10 7 kilowatt chargers, let's say. So straight away, they technically don't have the power to do what they would like to do. But the thing is, it's complicated, because that peak demand that you have on your site is taken in January, February. It's a once a year thing when all your heaters are on, it's really cold outside, it's snowing, whatever. And it could be that your depot, you want to do overnight charging. So now it's a very different scenario, because overnight you could have 65 kVA capacity available, because you've got some lights on, a bit of security, and maybe that's it. So you can imagine the complexities depend on what power have you got, what is the purpose of your charging? Is it for overnight, vehicles that are coming back from their daily runs, charging overnight before they go out the following morning? Cost is obviously on everyone's mind, because you're trying to run an efficient operational site, and now you've got this new scenario of bringing power to the depot. But having said that, all I would say to anybody looking at this is there's never been a better time to put EV charging in, for two reasons. One is the OZEF workplace charging grant. So if one organisation can have up to 40 grants worth £350 per socket. So that will take some of that cost and pain away. Also, there was a change made in the last budget, which kind of ran under the radar a little bit, in terms of 130% sort of super tax allowance. It really wasn't as well publicised I think it should have been, but effectively it means any investments you make in this space, you can write down to the value of 130% in that first year. Talk to whoever your chosen supplier is, they should be able to help you on this stuff, even on the grants.
And when people are looking into different solutions, what is out there on the market, and how can they choose what best suits them?
So there's lots of options out there, for sure. So for example, there's AC charging, which generally goes up to 22 kilowatt charge speed if you're on a three-phase supply. There aren't lots of commercial vehicles out there at the moment that can take 22 kilowatts, but that's kind of future-proofed in terms of future vehicles that do come around with much bigger battery packs or whatever. There's DC charging, unless your depot's working on a scenario where a vehicle's coming back, needs a really quick turnaround. So municipality type sites, local council sites might need something like that, with like dust carts and stuff like that, maybe. Otherwise, because don't forget, yes, you can have rapid charging, DC charging, which could be, what they're going up to now, 350 kilowatts, I think is kind of the latest, but it's huge investment. You need a lot of utilization to make that investment worthwhile. So for a lot of people that are doing daily runs and then coming back to the depot for overnight charging, AC is probably plenty. The other side of it is things like dynamic power management. A lot of people see that as a silver bullet solution. So if you go back to my earlier scenario of a site, with a 70 kVA, it's got 35 kVA available, then everybody thinks, okay, yeah, I'll have 10 chargers and I'll just put DPM on it. It solves everything. It might solve it from a regulatory perspective in terms of getting it approved by your DNO. That's true, because it means the site can't go over its capacity in terms of the charges you put on it. But it could, if you're not careful, lead to a very suboptimal performance when actually charging.
And you mentioned about regulations. What is the role of regulations when it comes to the market?
So there is what's called the Energy Networks Association, and apologies for all the acronyms, or the ENA process as we call it. The ENA represents the distribution network operators, or the DNOs. DNOs are really important though. They manage the grid. So they are responsible for keeping the lights on, long and short of it, in your area. And each area gets its DNO. You cannot pick and choose. It is what it is. So in your area, if you're putting in charge points in the workplace, or even at home, even if you've got engineers going out and you want to put charging at their home so they can charge their vans overnight because they take them home, it needs approval by through this ENA process. So you can't avoid that. So UK is, I would say, the most regulated market in Europe. I mean, a lot of my colleagues manage different regions. I look after the Nordics as well, and they're nowhere near as heavily regulated as the UK. And Netherlands is probably the most advanced European country currently on infrastructure. So you can almost look to the Netherlands and say, okay, what are they doing, and almost predict kind of where your own country probably should be heading in the next 2-3 years, something like that. So that's a real big thing. Hardware itself is always being looked at because regulations changing. We've had changes in Germany where public charging now has to have a screen and you have to give receipts and stuff like that. And in terms of how we used to work, you could have one charge point and the whole of Europe could use it. Today, that's really changing. What we're starting to see is Germany now have their own. France put some additional safety measures in with shutters inside the cap as extra kind of protection. So you produce a different one for France. UK has different earthing regulations. So you're potentially producing a different one for the UK. So you can imagine it's getting more. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, of each country splitting away a little bit from one kind of standard, which I guess is inevitable. So that's always been looked at. Our business hub is going from strength to strength. So for your depot, home charging as well, because again, a lot of your viewers will have engineers working from home who do take the van home overnight, and then you'll have your viewers wanting not just charging solutions at home, but it's more about, today they give that engineer a fuel card. So the cost doesn't impact the driver at all. They go to their local fuel station, they hand the card over, the company pays the bill. Again, we have an auto reimbursement service for chargers at home, which basically for any energy used by that engineer at home is effectively credited back to them and then billed back to their employer. And we're getting a lot of interest in that in the UK. Again, it's a really big thing in Europe, already has been for the last probably 3 years or so. But the UK is really starting to think about that now as electric vans are really starting to be rolled out. Because again, you just can't have a situation where you're asking me to take the van home and charge it at home. My energy bill is going to go up, obviously, inevitably. So the idea of that auto reimbursement is it just smooths that out. Anything they spend, they get credited, then the employer picks up the bill. So similar to a fuel card, but guess what? Your fuel station's now outside your front door.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And to our viewers, thank you very much for watching. And you can learn more in the description down below. Thank you, Alan.